What happens when AI can write your essay, fake a podcast, and fool you while doing it? In this episode, we're diving into the future of education, media, and truth itself. Today, I'm talking to Andrea Burns, journalist, broadcaster, and academic lead of screen and media at Edith Cowan University. She has spent over 2 decades shaping how stories are told and understood. And also Dr. Steinar Ellingsen, a specialist in journalism, digital media, and emerging technologies. He's at the front line helping the next generation of storytellers in an AI-driven world. In this episode, we unpack the real impact of AI in education, the opportunities, the risks, and the one skill every student and educator must master to stay ahead. Because in a world of infinite information, the real question is, can you still tell what's true? Let's get into it. Just a question for you. Am I saying it correctly?
Steinar is good, yes.
All right. So I just want to make sure I'm putting it down and I don't mess up. I'm dyslexic and I have issues with remembering numbers and names and I mess up. I speak 3 different languages. It's just kind of a mix in there. So I do apologize if I make any mistakes. I mispronounce your names.
I'm familiar with the issue. I'm Norwegian, so I've lived in Australia for more than 20 years, but I still have these moments where the 2 languages are kind of wrestling in my head before I get a sentence out.
Some say that is a superpower, Dr. Steinar. Is that right?
Yes. Well, to some degree, I suppose. It's good to know different languages.
Thinking about that, AI doesn't have a dyslexia, does it?
I think, well, if you ask it how many R's there are, how many times the letter R appears in the word raspberry, it'll often get it wrong. Maybe it does have dyslexia.
It is interesting because it shows up every day. Ever since 2022, I think, was it late 2022 when they came out the first model and was by public. Everyone was in awe of this new technology. If I get you back, Andrea, back in those early days, what did you feel about technology? And did you got excited like most the rest of us?
Yeah, I think it's sort of the brave new world, isn't it? When you're at that point of you don't know what you don't know, it sounds extraordinary. It sounds a bit frightening. It sounds fantastic, and a little bit frightening and a little bit terrifying. But I think as time's gone on, we've got a little bit more, well, I hope a lot more clever about how we are trying to harness the power of AI. We're nowhere near using it as full scope or being able to use it to serve us, as opposed to, I think the fear is that we're worried that it's going to kind of take over the world. And as educators, we have to work out what the boundaries are, but we're still not quite sure where they are for ourselves.
That's right. And if we're to guide our students to see where this AI train is going, Dr. Steinar, what is your advice for them?
Look, it's a sort of a case, I think, of learning how to use it before it uses us, and the only way to really learn about it is to learn by using it, right? So, and there are plenty of examples in the short period of time that it's been around that are, within educational settings where you can point to, this is how you use it in productive ways that will actually help your learning. And here's an example of just outsourcing everything and getting most of it wrong. If you just ask an AI tool to write an essay for you, it's going to do a great job at mimicking essay writing, but it'll invent sources, it'll hallucinate all sorts of things, and it's and maybe that's a good learning experience for a student, if they submit something that is so Frankenstein that it's you know, they get caught out for it. It's sort of okay, all right. So it can write an essay, but it can't do research or proper verification, and that obviously applies in journalism and the media as well, where we kind of Andrea and I obviously we try to teach our students that your currency is fact and truth and all of those sort of things. So um, it takes a lifetime to build trust and a minute to lose it, and that's why you got to learn how to use it in proper ways, in ways that actually supports you rather than to outsource production and outsource your thinking.
And I think that's the key point, isn't it? The thinking piece. Um, we can probably all remember when we were in primary school and you got your first calculator and you thought,
Mhm.
fantastic, I never have to do maths again.
Mm.
And until you went to a shop and or you got a job in a shop and someone gave you $10 for the $3.45 item. And, yes, you could stick it into the machine, but that lady's sitting there tapping a foot and she wants to go because she wants a change. So you've got to be able to work it out in your head. And I think that's kind of where we are. It's a terribly simplistic example, but I think that's kind of where we are at the moment, that yes, again, at the risk of sounding like your grade 3 teacher, you can cheat if you want to, but you're only cheating yourself. So the ability to be able to think and to process and to reason and to strategize and to be creative as well. That doesn't change. This stuff does a bit of grunt work for you, but you can't rely on it. So often it's easier not to use it.
My previous guest, Simon Fedock, he described it as, imagine when you go into the gym and you're bringing your AI with you and you tell AI, lift the 20-kilo dumbbell for me, do the chest press for me, do my deadlift for me, and expecting that you're going to get the benefits. It is not going to happen. But I love the example that you just gave about going and getting the change.
Mm,
These days, with the pay pass, and you can pay with a watch, you can pay with your phone, and rarely we pay with hard cash. And in the instances that the system is down and we need to dust off our previous skills of math and adding or subtracting, the simple example of something costing $17 and handing over $23 so you
mm,
can get back $5. And the person on the other side just freaks out because
yeah.
those skills now are going away. But we're forging new skills. And I wanted to ask you, Andrea, what kind of skills have you developed ever since you got involved with AI? Have you been more efficient? Are you seeing yourself being more productive in your field?
I've used it really to challenge myself and to try and get different ideas. It's, just as you would chat perhaps with a colleague or a group of friends and say, I'm thinking of doing this for this class. How else might you do it? And we are creatures of habit. So we've done things a particular way. And while you might freshen classes up every year and every semester, um, we think the way we think. And so being able to use AI really as almost a sounding board, you might throw out 9/10 of it, and you do, but it might just give you one half an idea that gives you a different way of doing things. That's kind of the way that I'm using it. And sometimes it's fabulous, sometimes it's absolute nonsense. But again, you've got to have that umbrella knowledge that you can pick the bits that aren't correct. Excuse me, and knowing what to discard and what is a useful or a different way of doing things. That's what I've found really useful. Um, I also love it for generating images for PowerPoints if we're using PowerPoints, because I don't need to go and source them, but I still have to source them, have to attribute them as AI illustrations, because again, you're modeling good behavior to your students, and that's important as well. They've got to know when you got the machine to do that particular picture for you, rather than spending 10 minutes trying to find a copyright image free shot that you can pop in the corner.
which is very interesting because
Mm.
I want my students to learn how to use AI, ethically use AI, use the critical thinking. And often I can show the prompt on the screen and say, this is what I'm using to get this outcome. And I have to toggle with it 2 or 3 times until I get the outcome that I want. And what I try to tell them is, you should stop taking at face value the first answer that AI is giving you. But in order to do that, you yourself have to have the skill, that critical thinking to say, yes, that is what I want, and that is not what I want,
Mm.
which becomes a problem because nowadays, Dr. Steiner, we have so much information out there and so much output that sometimes I find it difficult to see what's real and what's not. And particularly now with AI.
Yeah, look, there's a couple of recent-ish things that have come out that really underscores that notion as well. There was a study just came out from UTS and I believe Canberra Uni that tested whether people could actually decipher whether photographs or portrait images of people were actual photographs or AI generated images, and it was less than a third of the participants who got it right, and I tried it myself and I didn't get everything right either, and I think that's like we're in a sort of limbo at the moment between there's obviously a lack of regulation, and also we like to think of ourselves as so smart that I'll never be fooled by this. So I think that kind of cockiness is one of humanity's greatest pitfall at this particular moment in time, and I really think we do need to be extra cautious. Whether it's just, scrolling social media at night when you're bored or watching TV and sharing something you kind of latch onto for whatever reason, thinking that this is actual pictures, videos, or whatever, and potentially being a cog in the misinformation machinery. The other thing is, podcasts, which are, the medium that everyone loves more than anything, I suppose. Um, the podcast index that came out a few months ago showed that on their index, more than half of the podcasts listed were AI generated ones.
Which is the
And
terrifying thing from a journalism point of view, isn't it? I mean,
it really
that.
is like it's because it sounds like the real thing. There's one particularly popular one called the Epstein Files, which is entirely AI generated, right? They've fed the Epstein Files into this AI agent and generated 2 hosts, and it sort of sounds like something that NPR might do in the
Oh,
US,
wow.
but um, so it's very listenable in a way. But as other people who are smarter than me have pointed out, they've gone through it forensically and found that it's got a, huge amount of factual errors in it, that it's hallucinated things that aren't actually in the Epstein files, but it sounds so authoritative. You can't tell the difference between the bot voices and a human voice. And that's really concerning. Like, what does that do to trust? And just today, actually, there was a news report about pink slime journalism. I don't know if you came across that, right? We talked about that this morning, Andrea.
Yes, we did. I mean, what a fantastic name for starters. I mean, for people who don't know what it is, they've used, the ABC has discovered that some of the newspapers in the southwest, some online sites have been popping up that are allegedly The Guardian or even the ABC. I think that was one of them, and they are all generated. It's all AI generated stuff taken from other legitimate news sources. which I don't know quite where the pink slime name came from. Steiner, do you know?
Oh, it's from the food industry. You know, like the pink slime is sort of what they make when they make chicken nuggets at
Mm.
McDonald's in the US.
Oh.
It's this sort of super duper low grade chemical meat kind of thing that they churn and chuck it into chicken nuggets. So that's, you know, it's the lowest
Ah,
kind of meat quality that
Yes.
somehow, and I'm not even sure if it passes food grade standards.
it
You know,
doesn't. It doesn't pass journalism standards
but
either, and that makes
no, and
this the knees and lips deep fried of journalism, isn't it? These
oh,
pink slime sites.
yeah, and that was, you know, in the ABC's sort of expose of this. You know, they found that there were multiple sites like this that popped up in local communities, and that's really an important part of it, because regional and local communities are, you know, so underserved with news to begin with, because local papers have shut down. um, you know, the big news broadcasters might have cut the local office, those sort of things. And up comes these AI generated websites that kind of look like the real thing. And they had created fake profiles of, you know, fake journos who, with bios that said that they had covered local news for more than a decade. And they had AI generated pictures of crime scenes and things like that. That was just so horribly, horribly wrong.
And there was
And
another. Sorry, Steiner. There was another story that came out this morning, similar. One of the students was showing me, and she was incensed by it, which I love. I love the passion of it. But it was a similar thing, but they were AI generated political advocates. And so this person looked like a legitimate person urging people in the local community. And again, these were country kinds of areas, urging them to come to this protest or oppose this particular thing. And it said, I can't remember the phrase, but it was something like a political, wasn't advisor, but it was something like that. And it was only because someone had done some digging that they realized that this was not a real person, B, a legitimate issue, or if it was that they were leapfrogging onto something legitimate and falsely um, tipping the balance of coverage on it. And I think that, to come back to your original question, Evan, that's the piece that for us as educators, it's, to put it really bluntly and in a very Australian way, we're teaching young people how to hone their bullshit detector and to be able to say, yeah, no, that doesn't sound right to me, and to be able to question that. And that's a pretty cool skill to have, and AI doesn't have it.
That was very Australian of you. It's the
Sorry.
yeah, nah. It's the how can you put a negative and a positive and still make sense? All in
Yeah,
Australia,
absolutely.
which makes you kind of wonder, you know, missing the old days when the only thing that you had to worry about was a Nigerian prince sending you email, trying to get you, trying to get you the bank account because you just, you know, you were a recipient of $1 million. Um, Obviously, AI has made this much easier for someone to scam at scale, in the global scale.
Uh-huh.
And that's the scary part, because just like you said, somebody can just deep fake a journal's resume and become influential. It's incredible that an algorithm can now be influential, and not only influence you know, people that are prone to scamming, but this is a whole new generation that is growing up. And that is the worry for me as an educator, because how much has changed the learning experience of a student from back in the day to now, having all these tools when everything is so easy? Do you see that in your practice? Sorry,
No, yeah,
Andrea.
absolutely. I think we do. And
Steiner's doing some fantastic research into exactly this, looking at the impact of journalism on AI in journalistic practice, and he's knee deep in some interviews at the moment with media professionals. Maybe you can expand some more on that, Steinar.
Yeah. Look, I think in industry, people are professional, and as we kind of talked about earlier, that journalistic currency is truth and facts that are verifiable, that they can actually demonstrate to their audience that this is true and here's the evidence, right? But for audiences who are just doom scrolling their way through their social media feed, they very often don't have time to kind of go and, okay, I'm going to click on that and spend 2 minutes reading an article. My attention span only goes for like a quarter of a second, and I got to move on to the next thing. And that's obviously very, very frustrating. And that's often why that sort of scams and misinformation sort of sticks so much more than what it perhaps used to be. Although, people have fallen for various scams throughout the ages. And I think for professional journalists in particular, they're very sort of suspicious of these tools and don't necessarily like using them, which is one of the things that I've found is, if you talk to someone in management or higher up within the media organization, they will look at it and go, this is great. We're going to be so much more productive now, and it's going to free up all this time for staff to do more important work or keep digging into that, so they must use it. But the people at the coalface, the reporters and the journalists, they largely sort of find that, I just don't trust it. And I don't want to put my name to something that I didn't actually produce, whether that's a script for a video piece or a written article or a radio story. It's a sort of, no, it doesn't sit well with me. And
It feels like cheating, doesn't it? I mean, and that's the things
it
that we've got.
does.
You've got one reputation, and journalists have to guard that jealously because you don't get a second go at it, and especially not in this world where being cancelled or the risk of being cancelled is very real. It's curious, isn't it, that I think for one example in the local industries is, I know Steinar and I are ex-journos, so we're working journos, and little things like using AI to transcribe an interview, that's a good use of time. That's a good use of the technology because it saves you hours of going through tapes or audio or whatever. But you always go back and listen to it and make sure that what it's transcribed is exactly what you heard. So, it might speed it up in one sense, but, again, a good journo would listen to an interview, know exactly which bits they were going to use, and would probably be able to remember them anyway. And so the AI is really just another level of checking, but it doesn't mean that you can't take it as it is. I mean, it just doesn't work that way, because anybody who's ever transcribed something and had it mangle the language knows that you can't rely on it.
Also, just because you mentioned scams, I love those. I love those sort of scam baiter videos and that. I really do. One of the units that I teach here at Media Law and Ethics, and that includes not just journalism students, but comms and advertising students and screen production students are in that unit as well. So, we try to kind of look at media more broadly and scams, being one of those things, like where do we draw the line between, the local burger joint claiming that, I'm selling the best burger in town to,
Aren't they all?
of course they are. And that's fine. But, to kind of going, yeah, if you buy this shake, you'll look 20 years younger and you'll drop 40 kilos overnight,
Mhm.
and then, yeah, people chuck in tons of their monies and never even see the product. Um, but it is really funny because even some of these like professionals who go out to catch scammers, they fall victim for scams themselves, in that
Yep.
process, and they're the people that are right at the front line of it, So it's sort of cruel world out there, and you really got to. And again, this is as educators, you got to, yeah. It's that bullshit detector that Andrea mentioned earlier.
Right.
That's one of the most important things that we can teach the next generation of professionals.
I think it also goes back to, and again, these are very human skills and so-called soft skills of knowing your students, getting to know them, and that's not always possible if you've got hundreds of them. But in courses where they're very people focused, knowing how they speak, knowing how they write, knowing their breadth of knowledge. I've had international students this year who do rely on some translation apps or AI or whatever, and actually saying to them, look, I know that this is tough because you're trying to do it in a second language, but I would rather that your grammar was incorrect and we can correct that than you go and use this to write something, because I know that that doesn't sound like you. And I can pick it at 50 paces, but it's because we know the students. So again, those soft skills are really important, but also your critical thinking to be able to read something and go, that doesn't sound like that student.
That's right.
So, that's the other side of AI, is that it's really reinforcing the need in our society to actually still be able to have a conversation with people. And I'm sounding like a very old person now, but, to be able to pick up the phone and make a phone call to somebody rather than just sending off an email or a text. Um, these are the things that as educators, that's part of the gig these days. And it may feel odd, but this is the brave new world and we have to navigate it.
So it's humanity's DNA to choose the path of the less resistant. It's
No.
always been, it always been in nature everywhere. Yeah, always has been. How can I do this with less effort? And I can see that when I was a student, I'd rather take a test or do something that I'm not supposed to do so I can get the grade, which I see this from the student perspective. But I also see this from the educator perspective. And you framed it very nicely. You said some skills, the soft skills, will be very difficult to be replicated by an AI. To be able to understand, to critically think, to use divergent thinking, anything that can help you become better person by using these tools, not relying on these tools.
Oh,
They are the students. But what about us, the educators? The number one skill in our digital literacy, for us to recognize it first, the bullshit detector,
oh,
so we can pass it on to our students as a filter. Say, you know what? I've been there, I've done that. That's the outcome. It's up to you if you want to go or don't. So,
oh.
what is that number one skill educators in digital literacy that they have to master before they get into front of a cohort, Dr. Steiner?
Look, it's sort of, we got to upskill in the same areas that we are trying to teach to our students, and I there's a couple of things where you got to kind of try and push some boundaries with new technology from your own sort of um, end as well, to sort of see, huh, this sounds this just sounds too good, or actually figure out a way, how do I fact check AI? Is it, was, um, and then I think once you sort of have your own little aha moments and you realize, you know, okay, this is how I went about that, then it's a good way to kind of teach from your own kind of little mini case studies, if you like. So, but I think through that as well, just kind of, being, it's almost like this is something you both have touched on, about we got to teach people how to be human. And I think we also got to remind ourselves to be human a bit as well. Like Andrea was saying, you got to teach kids these days to pick up a telephone and actually use their phones for phoning people, because they are so used to using technology in that way. And I think that's kind of true for us as well. But um, just coming back to kind of, learning about how AI works, and thinking about, where does the information that I get from an AI model actually come from? What sort of things have it been trained on to give me this particular output? So one thing I do with my students, for example, is asking AI to summarize court cases. And very often, then when we go and we fact check the summary, we discover that, if we published that, copy paste, we would have been sued for defamation because accidentally we said that the victim was the perpetrator, and things like that. And that is such light bulb moments for students. And it was that for me as well, 'cause it's sort of, when you listen to tech CEOs talk about how it's going to make the world redundant in the next 18 months, I don't think that's going to be the case. But we got to be able to upskill ourselves in those areas. Think about what sort of biases these machines feed back to us, stereotypes, bias, whether political or cultural or whatnot. That's again, it's maybe not so much the bullshit detector, but that kind of, productive cynicism that you need to come at it with.
And I think, again, to go back to your point um, about being not, trying different things and trying those new skills and the digital literacy that we require. It is also those very human skills of being curious, but also of being brave, of trying something and maybe failing spectacularly, and that's okay. Gosh, if you can't practice something in education, well, then where can you practice it? It's a sort of a training ground for life, isn't it?
Right.
And it's something that at our uni, they've taken quite a progressive view of this. And in the last couple of years, we've rewritten many of our programs, sort of certainly whole swathes of how we teach things. And we're going to a new model where, when I tell students, well, no, we don't have essays, and no, we don't have exams, and no, we don't have, in our particular disciplines. And just because we find we get better results when we do the old-fashioned try something, it will teach you something, we'll show you how to do it. And quite often it does involve, writing or interviewing skills or presenting skills combined with the digital, how to use a camera, how to use a studio, how to use all the things. So you're getting the two in one, but then you've got to apply it. And you can't fake that. You've got to learn how to do it, and you've got to try the scary thing. And it can be terrifying, but when it works, it's magic. And you see the look on the students' face of they're like 3-year-olds, I did it. And I think, yeah, good for you. We're all quite childlike in that way, aren't we? And it's a good reminder to the adults in the room as well that, it's not good enough anymore for us to go, oh, I don't know how to do it. We've got to get in there. Even, I've had to get into this radio studios with these new whiz-bang gear this year. And just try and slowly teach myself how to do it. Admittedly, I do it when the students aren't here because I don't really want to see them seeing me failing spectacularly. But that's what you've got to do. And whether you're 20 or 50 or 80 or 100, mastering that new skill is pretty exciting. And that's a good thing to be doing.
That's amazing. I love that. Fail spectacularly.
So important, and I think that's also something that we really integrate into how we do assessments and training, is to kind of give them that space to fail miserably. I used to work with a colleague many years ago who had this motto, which was FIFO, fail early, fail often. And
Yes.
yeah, it's so true. But it can't be, then you got to make to kind of design curriculum and do those sort of things in ways where there's room for that, to learn from it and come back to it, and then sort of over time build up confidence and skills
Yeah.
and things, so that when you actually do get assessed, you're at your peak and you can shine.
Yeah. We had Evan, we do a radios class with the students every Friday, and that's where we've just come from today. And we had a beautiful example of exactly that, where we had two young women who had never done radio shows before. And last week they did it, and they were almost clinging to each other as they went into the studio. And it was very kind of like that. And then this week, I don't know if it was because one of them brought cupcakes, but they were on. They went into the other studio and they practiced, and they said, we've shaken all our nerves out. And they'd formulated what they were going to do, and they practiced it, and they'd had a go, and they'd tried the technology, and they worked with all the things. And the content that they came up with was magic. And one of my ex-students was listening on the radio as she was driving, and she said, "Who was that chick who was presenting? They sounded legit," is the text that she sent me. I mean, her grammar's probably not very good, but, when you're getting that kind of feedback, and when they came out of the studio, they were flying. They were really, really thrilled. And that's modern education, and that's what young people and old people, that's the kind of magic that you want in the classroom. And so if you've got the smarts to harness the technology, whatever that is, whether that's working a radio desk or AI or whatever, it opens up the whole world.
Learning is about expanding your horizon, and the way we learn best, as we all know, is by playing.
Yeah.
Going back to when we were kids, that's when we learn the best.
Mm.
And we were not afraid to fail, people, Dr. Steiner, and we weren't afraid to fail spectacularly. That's how you build confidence. You build confidence by doing things, by doing the thing and gaining the skills that will build you the confidence. And I'm guessing that's what happened to your students, which, by the way, amazing. Only one. I've been doing this for at least 6 months, and I'm still very, very conscious of how am I doing. And all of a sudden, Sandra said that you're going to have two distinguished guests in your podcast, and I looked at your profile. I said I better shape up and I better come and bring my A game. So how am I doing so far, Dr. Steiner?
Evan, I think you're doing a great job. And I think with doing these sort of things, whether you're on the radio or on TV or in a podcast, one of the biggest hurdles, I think, for students or anyone who is starting out with those sort of things is to learn how to get over yourself. And sort of, when I started in journalism, I worked for a newspaper, and I was told that I had a face for radio and a voice for newspapers. So I was too ugly for TV, and my voice sounded awful, and I couldn't be on the radio, so I had to write and take photos. So, and that obviously now, many decades later, it still sticks with me. So it must have made an impression. But I think also when you're starting out as well, you are very self-conscious and you really think about yourself. And that was another thing that came out of today's radio program. Andrea sort of complimented two of our presenters on that, you know, listeners don't get hung up on that sentence where you mispronounced a word. You will do that because you're super self-conscious. What they will remember is the vibe. What they'll remember is kind of, if you had a technical problem and there was dead air for 3 seconds on the radio, and you just talked your listeners through it and said, "Oh, we seem to have some technical problems." You might walk out of the studio thinking, "Oh, that was a train wreck because we had technical problems." But listeners don't care about that. It's about how you kind of manage those bumps in the road and how you just keep going. That's the thing, because, if you start out doing a podcast series, maybe the first episode isn't going to win awards, but you're going to make another one, and then you're going to make another one, and then you're going to keep going. And that's the sort of thing. Like, if it can get a little bit better every time, fantastic. And then eventually you kind of lose your ego in that process, and then you focus on making the thing.
Yeah. And that's the curiosity, isn't it? That's the curiosity and the critical thinking and the doing. You just do it. Don't talk about it. Just get on with it. And see what you can make, and then look at it and think and you're right, Steinar, it's about parking the ego and looking at yourself as a product almost, and saying the product's doing this weird thing with its head, or the product keeps saying or whatever it is, but how do we get around that? And that's the piece that, whether you are a journalist, whether you are teaching art, whether you're an elite athlete, it's about how does the product perform and what does the product need to do to get better. And so whether you're harnessing AI, using more practice, using machines to help you get fitter, whatever it is, that ability to question and to challenge yourself, that's the magic. So I've got a lot of magic going on today, but it's all magic, isn't it? I mean, and that's the magic of learning.
Absolutely. And that's we as educators need to be dramatizing learning, because we have to face it. AI can do a better job of pulling information. We have to make sure they're the correct information, but AI will do a great job pulling the information. A book will give the best information, structured information to a student if they're willing to sit down and listen, and read it. But an educator needs to dramatize the learning experience in order to them to feel empowered, to be in the moment, to have that sense of magic that Andrea just described. So that is, for me, the role of the educator, is to pass on the seed, the flame, the passion that you have, the pathos, if you like, that you have about the subject, to pass it on to the next generation. But what about the future? And I'm not talking about Skynet here, right? I'm not talking about the the future that looks bleak and all that. I'm talking about the future that is going to be in the next, I want to say it's 2-3 years, but we know that in 6 months everything might be changing again. What is the outlook, Andrea? What is the outlook of the future in 6 months using all these tools for your field?
I, at the risk of sounding political, I think I always come back to the be alert but not alarmed. It is about knowing how does it work? How might I use it? What does that mean for me? Do I like it? If I hate it, why would I use it? I mean, just as whether you're using a voice recorder or a telephone to record your conversation, if I don't like using it, I'm not going to do it. So I think as educators, our role is to demystify it, to also set some boundaries of what's okay for our students. At our uni, we've taken quite a progressive view of it, but we're in the habit of saying, you need to tell me if you've used it for work that you're handing in, and it's just a standard line on the bottom. I used Grammarly, or I used whatever to check a couple of things in this. Fine, declare it so I know where you've come from. But again, that curiosity is so important. My Steiner's heard this story, but my elderly dad is 82, and he'll hate me calling him elderly. But he said to me at dinner the other night, "Bloss, what's this? What's this Chat GPT thing about? What is it? Can you show me how to use it?" I said, "Of course. We'll sit down and he put a couple of prompts in there, and oh gosh, this is clever, isn't it? Oh my goodness. Could it write me a letter, to the council? I've got to complain about something. Yeah, sure, Dad, pop it in." And it came back, brrr, and he just thought it was marvelous. And then the next conversation we had, I used that Chat GPT to find out something that he wanted to inquire about. And the answer that came back, he said, well, 3/4 of it was rubbish, but I used its prompts to go to this person and this person and this person, and it was terrific. So, that critical thinking to be able to go, I can discount that stuff, but this stuff is useful to me. Marvelous. And he's 82 years old. That's the future. That's all of us who are not 12 being able to say, I don't get this, and being curious enough to dive in and give it a red hot crack and see if we like it. And then if it's useful to us, we use it, and if it's not, don't.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I think we use it for in some of our classes. So we have a website that's kind of the mothership of our degree programs, where we publish student works, and we live stream radio programs and things like that. And sometimes we want to embed media from elsewhere on the internet, whether it's a video or a social media post or something like that. And then you got to grab a code from whatever website it is and plonk it into your own post. And then when you look at it, it doesn't show up properly on in the preview. And we've used that. That was another one of those moments that we've had with students going, well, do you know HTML code? It's like, no, I don't, because I'm a journalism student. I'm not a computer student, computer science guy. Don't want to be a programmer. Exactly. Well, why don't you copy that code and paste it into one of your AI tools and tell it that I want this element to look like this on my website. Can you tweak that code for me?
Mm.
And then 9 times out of 10, it can do that for us. So it's sort of in those sort of ways, like actually helping them. And if it doesn't do it right the first time, how can we ask different questions of it so that we get it right without having to, spend a semester learning how to do HTML coding, for example. And that is not taking away, the importance of people who do know HTML coding, but for a journalist, as is kind of quick, I need this. All right, great. There we go. It works.
That's right. It's been wonderful. This episode has a lot of magic sprinkle all over it. Has,
I love it.
has nuggets, golden nuggets, left, right, and center. And I'm going to use it in my practice as well. But as a closing advice, what is the one thing that our listeners can take and use it tomorrow? Andrea?
It's sort of the same advice that we give our students. Think about something that you don't know about and go and find out about it. And that might be an AI tool. It might be a way of doing something that frightens you a little bit. Like, what's the worst that can happen? You're not going to break anything. Don't publish it if you're not sure about it, but just give it a crack. Because you may find it is brilliant. And if it gives you time back, as journalists, we have one, apart from getting a story up, you've got one ambition, and that is one day you would like to have time for lunch. If it gives you time for lunch, that's magic, more magic. So give it a crack.
Amazing. Dr. Steiner?
Yeah, look, I've always been a fan of that kind of ethos, buy the ticket, take the ride sort of approach to life and professional work. So absolutely. I think, because technology, this isn't the last bit of technology that's going to be developed, that's going to blow our minds. Give it 5 years and I'm sure we'll have new tools and maybe, you know, maybe generative AI is part of it, but it's not going to look like, you know, ChatGPT, Copilot, Anthropic, Claude, or Gemini, or whatever we play with today. Think about how quickly these things have developed in less than 4 years. So I think it's just kind of, and most of these things are free, or at least there's a free version of it these days. So kind of just have a play with it. I understand the reluctance, and for some it's political, for some it's other reasons why. But I think and I think it's just important as educators, because we know that a lot of our students are going to use it, whether we like it or not. So I think we do need to sort of have a play, and maybe we don't have to become experts, but we need to know enough about it to have an informed conversation with someone who is an expert about it. So yes, kind of just echoing Andrea's sentiment there, as just go play.
Or that your students are tasked to teach you something. Maybe you could be the student this time, and maybe that's the option as well. They're very clever at this stuff, so
I love that.
they're not
I'm
frightened.
gonna steal that.
Yeah,
That's
we can do
going to
that.
be for next semester. That's going to be my opening class. Is going to be teach me something I don't already know about generative AI.
There you
It's
go.
actually very good.
Yeah.
Wish I'd thought
I'm
of
using
that.
it for the next semester too. But in all honesty, I really loved to come in at the new building at ECU and just look at all the toys, the shiny toys that you have, and to see the new generation coming through journalism, media. It's going to blow up. It used to be the radio, then TV, and then we had streaming, and now we have podcasting, social media. Everybody can go out there and broadcast themselves, the ideas, and create a following. But it has been an amazing experience talking to you, Andrea, Dr. Steinar. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope to see you at the conference and shake your hand and meet you in person.
We're looking forward to it. Thanks so much,
Absolutely.
Evan.
Looking forward to it, and thanks for chatting.